Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. Today we're going to be talking about how artificial intelligence and some of the newer findings can affect people all around the world. My guest is an expert on this topic. Mr. Kevin Cassidy is currently a managing partner at IC1 Global, which is an international development consultancy providing support in addressing integrated social, economic, and environmental challenges. Mr. Cassidy has 40 years of international experience across the United Nations system, and most recently with the International Labor Organization, commonly called the ILO. Today, he will be discussing the ways by which AI impacts our working lives, what can be done to ensure that countries are prepared for its impact on jobs, and how youth can future-proof their opportunities in a transformed world of work. Welcome, Kevin Cassidy.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I appreciate you being with me this morning. Let's just start off with a basic definition. AI, if we had three people in the room, we'd probably have four definitions of AI. How do you define it?
So in the broadest sense, AI describes technologies that enable computers and machines to sort of simulate human intelligence and has problem-solving capabilities. So within that broad universe of AI, we have something called machine learning, which is a specific approach that focuses on developing deep algorithms which allow the computers to learn and make decisions based on data. So instead of explicitly programming them to perform a task, these machine learning models are trained on large data sets, which are capacitated by humans, by individuals, putting data in there, and to identify these patterns and improve performance. Many people may know examples of machine learning like Gen AI. Gen AI can create original content, text and images and videos at a user's prompt. And now all of this takes place through a natural language processing, NLP, and that's supported by neural networks and pre-trained language modules. This is mimicking the human brain with voluminous data being analyzed. And this enables the systems to understand and generate human language. Now, why is it so important? So unlike in the past when mechanization during, say, the Industrial Revolution had replaced or augmented the work of the physical labor, Gen AI has the greatest impact on highly skilled and professional work. So this is the kind of roles that define the 21st century's knowledge economy. So, we're looking at, is this no longer a safe haven for robotization? So effectively these non-routine cognitive tasks. And also, it takes place in the context of a much wider interconnectedness of the global economy and society. So these large exposures move out of the workforce on location-based and factory level to a global and remote application.
Mm-hmm. Now, another term we hear a bit about is machine learning. First of all, what is machine learning, and how do AI and machine learning work together or impact our global economy?
Right. So machine learning is kind of the higher end of that, AI terminology. Some are very passive, but as I was mentioning in this earlier question, machine learning, focuses on developing algorithms. So it becomes independent. It can make its own decisions based on data that is provided to it. Now, of course, we have to be careful because we're not going to allow the machines to make the decisions, right? I mean, they are algorithms and they may have a form of consciousness. I think I use that in quotation marks. But we don't want to have machines making life or death decisions on human beings. So, for example, people who have watched sci-fi for years will see that, analyzing data, what is the biggest threat to our planet ecologically through war and internecine warfare? Humans, right? We're the ones who are engaged in creating these greenhouse gases and attacking one another. So we don't want the machines to be in charge. So it has to be a human focus.
It certainly does. And what are countries doing to harness the power of these forces and still make sure that they're not going to have a negative impact on the people in their country or people even beyond the borders of their country?
Right. So, I mean, just look at the wider context. AI is already in use in many settings, right? It's biometric scanning, right? This is facial, fingerprint, iris scans. We see that in our laptops or phones, navigation, roads, marine aviation. We see it in e-commerce. Voice assistants, these chatbots, home devices. So it is quite ubiquitous, and we know that AI, as it becomes more integrated into business operations, we want to see higher levels of productivity and increased global growth. So we want to make sure that this digital divide is overcome. So, access to electricity, the access to internet and data centers, the presence of technical expertise, funding and investment, all of this is very important about how we're going to ensure that we're able to take advantage of that. So what are countries doing? I mean, they're looking at how AI is going to be impacting upon their populations, right? Because introduction of technology at the end of the day is going to be a political decision, not a technical one. If people are thrown out of work, especially people on the higher end, people have lots of debt if there's no jobs for themselves, so they have to be very careful about how they're going to find ways to have people earn a living. So wealthier economies, they are generally better prepared than lower income countries to address this. But the first step for any country is preparedness. So we talk about two aspects. We talk about foundational AI preparedness. So this is having a digital infrastructure as well as the human capital, that enables people and firms to adopt the AI. So knowledge, skills, health, and allowing people to be productive members of society. The second important thing on preparedness is that second generation. So this is the emphasis then should be placed on strengthening the digital innovation, the capital, adapting legal and ethical frameworks to govern this. So a proactive and inclusive approach towards maintaining social cohesion. And this requires a number of steps that we can go well beyond the confines of this program. But we want to ensure, and countries want to ensure, that people, whether they're influenced or impacted by this, have a voice in the design and implementation and the use of those technologies.
Yeah, we certainly do, because they are going to impact us whether we want them to or not. When you're watching Global Connections Television, which is a privately funded, independently produced program, the opinions expressed on Global Connections are solely those of the moderator and his guest. We'd invite our viewers to go to our website at www.globalconnectionstelevision.com to view previous programs. Also, if you're involved with a PBS or community access television station, or perhaps an educational institution that has an intra-campus television hookup, or you have a podcast, or maybe you just have a computer, you like our shows, you would like to share them, please feel free to do so. Global Connections Television is provided at no cost as a public service to help us better understand international issues and how they impact our lives. Today we're taking a look at the concept of AI and what it can be done to prepare and use it for future-proofing our societies in the employment arena and educational arena and elsewhere. My guest today is Mr. Kevin Cassidy. Kevin Cassidy is currently a managing partner at 1C1 Global. He had over 40 years of international experience across the UN system, most recently with the International Labor Organization, commonly called the ILO. And today he's going to discuss the ways in which AI impacts our working lives and what can be done to ensure that countries are prepared for its impact on jobs, and how youth can future-proof their opportunities. Future-proof, I think, pretty well sums it up, Kevin. That's exactly right. It's always a challenge, and you worked with this in the International Labor Organization. Many UN agencies do. Private sector folks are involved in it in many areas. But how do you specifically work with the youth in future-proofing their educational opportunities, their skills opportunities, to make sure that they're prepared and that they're not locked into some dead-end job or something that'll be terminated, 5 or 6 years or something like that?
With this introduction of AI, which is transforming our society as we speak, young people are introduced to technology younger and younger. And so I think, they have some understanding about the tools that they will need and some of the skills that will be attractive to employers. But we have challenges, right? So currently, our global youth employment, what we really look at for the future, is at 13%. This is the lowest rate in 15 years globally. And 20% of those global youth are neither in employment, education, or training, what we call the NEETs. So when people have dropped out of the workforce, they've dropped out of education, their future becomes a bit bleak. And 2/3 of those youth who are neither in employment, education, or training are women. So there is a gender dimension to looking at the future on this. And as we sort of refer back to the UN's SDGs, 1 out of every 3 of these youth are off in countries that are off track for the SDG target 8.6, which seeks to reduce that. So the job market will be dynamic for young people. They'll be influenced by key trends such as technological advancements, green jobs, healthcare, remote work, and they also have to focus on things like soft skills. So this is skills such as critical thinking, creativity, emotional intelligence, and adaptability will be crucial. And employers will be looking for those individuals who can navigate complex problems and work well in diverse teams. So this is emotional intelligence as well. If we want to engage the youth and we want them to be positive about the future, what I'm, sort of signifying as envisaging or as a career resilience, young people have to be reflective, learning, and adapt fast on what areas they can work in well, what is going to be automated, and then using the sort of lifelong learning as a way to stay current and relevant on that. Secondly, the young people need to focus on human-to-human interaction, right? So prioritizing and improving your social intelligence, right? So these are important skills that the employers for the future are looking at. And now, persuasion, empathy, motivation, communication. Thirdly, I think the youth are going to have to be strategic, right? They're going to have to seek ways in which they can integrate AI into their current opportunities and create new opportunities so they're seen as a value, as a net positive for that particular company. And they'll have to show flexibility, resourcefulness, and problem solving. And also, it's important for young people to think about developing themselves, not just the position that they're working in, right? Because the world of work constantly changes. We know that over the last 50 years, about 65 to 70% of the jobs that are currently available today didn't exist then. So new jobs are coming online all the time, and people will have to be flexible to move in those directions.
They certainly will, and they will need to be prepared. I'm glad you mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals, which were 17 logical, practical, achievable goals developed by the UN General Assembly, I guess in 2015, came online 2016, and run over a 15-year continuum. And they're very laudable goals to eradicate poverty, to end hunger, to empower women, to combat climate change, just on across the board. And a large number of organizations, faith-based groups, service clubs, service groups like Rotary International, Lions, Optimist, Kiwanis, different ones like that are involved in this. But the majority, from my take on reading about the Sustainable Development Goals, that the majority of the people around the world still don't know what they are and don't have a grasp of them at this point, even though they are working to help achieve them. In many cases, they're just not aware that they're working to do that. But one group that we were talking about the youth a minute ago, another group that has been disadvantaged over the years has been women. And of course, Sustainable Development Goal number 5, I guess it is, to empower women and girls. What can be done to help them in their particular situation? And I know the UN system, they have UN Women. I'm guessing almost every UN agency has some program focusing on women, microeconomics to help women develop their businesses, what have you. But what can be done to focus on their particular situation, which could vary from country to country?
Yeah, I mean, there are many dimensions to that, Bill. So let's talk about some that we see in developing countries or low-income countries. Much more traditional societies, so women have a traditional role, and their role is to look after the family. Now, we know that women are capable of much more than just running the household, and my mother was a scientist, and she did both of those jobs, and I think a lot of women today are struggling with that. So how do we put practices and policies in place that will help women? Right? So looking at childcare, a very important part for women who want to continue to work in the workforce or to enter the workforce, to ensure that they have access to childcare. Maternal leave, paternal leave, right? It's a job for the family to look after the family. It's not just the role of the women to do so on that. Doing these kind of blind assessments of people when they're applying for jobs is quite important, because when people are hiring, unfortunately, they hire people that look like them and talk like them. And if you have a male-dominated sort of board or a male-dominated panel, They're going to choose the person who went to their school, who speaks like them, who has the same experiences. But when you do blind testing, women actually, in a much higher percentage, are the ones who are chosen for those jobs. So look at the skill sets that are available for that. But also then look at the opportunities. Gender equality is quite important. And then other issues which are much more rights-based and so, but have a direct impact on the world of work, which is violence and harassment. You know, the ILO has a convention, 192, which looks at how do you empower women by eliminating the difficulties that women face, the harassment that they face in the workplace as well. So I think a combination of those social protection measures, the idea of legislation that is going to empower them by providing opportunities for the family to ensure that the women could enter the workforce and stay in the workforce, I think all of that is going to help. So it takes a mindset change, political will, and funding for all of this to happen, because on education, many of the women are, and young women and girls are locked out, and because of poverty, it drives, unfortunately, to the lowest common denominator.
It certainly does. And we mentioned the International Labor Organization and the Sustainable Development Goals. And if our viewers would like, they can go to www.un.org to get more information on the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as a myriad of UN programs, everything from war and peace, peacekeeping, to humanitarian assistance, the Polio Plus program with Rotary, just on across the board. And I know your former agency, the ILO, is doing so much in this area. And our viewers can go to www.ilo.org to get a just unbelievable just cascade of studies and reports and a variety of other things to deal with these problems, because they do affect literally billions of people around the world. We only have 8.2 billion, but so many of us are affected by them. And of course, UN agencies do impact all 82 billion people on this planet in some way, shape, or form. We don't have time to get into that, unless you would like to, but we're down. Well, please, go on. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just the other day, and I'll give a very practical example. I was setting up a phone for my mother-in-law, and one of the service providers, I won't mention the company, but when I was setting it up and I was looking at the applications sort of icon, and I clicked on that, the global goals were actually included in that. So here's an amazing way where companies can actually come and provide that to people. Now, it was a bit buried under the functional ones like, calculator and navigation and all of that. But it's really important to understand that if we don't all pull together to achieve these goals, and not just one or two goals, but it is an integrated set of goals that are mutually supportive. And by using very clever ways of introducing young people, introducing older people to what those goals are, I think people get it, because they have life experiences, they have anticipations for the life ahead of them, in order to have a planet that they can be proud of, that they're contributing to, and for their own personal sort of advancement and fulfillment within their role in the world of work. So keep up the great work out there, you service providers, and get that information out to people, because I think that's really quite important.
There you go. And I'm assuming you were referencing the International Telecommunications Union, I guess the ITU. I'm not sure if that's the one that was WIPO, or it could be both of them now that I think about it. But,
could be many. I don't know who did it, but
yeah, it could be.
It could be a very clever way of doing it. So
that's right. That's
hats off to to them.
The important thing is to bring it to the attention of the public and to make them aware of these problems, and to really alert them to the fact that they can be helpful in dealing with these problems, because these problems are going to affect them if they're not affecting them right now. And we've got to really get on board with Sustainable Development Goals, because we got quite a setback with COVID and other problems too, with wars and that type of thing. The illegal invasion of Ukraine didn't help the situation, and conflicts in Gaza certainly are not helping the situation. Well, Kevin, we're down to about our last few minutes, but let me ask you in closing, what do you feel are the most important issues or most important problems or obstacles that we may be confronting right now? And if they're out there, how do we deal with them?
Right. That's a tall order. I'm going to have to narrow my focus a little bit.
Take 3 or 4 minutes. That's
So Bill, I think, you and I have been speaking about these issues over the years, and I think you always know that I'm in a rights-based organizations. And I think it's quite important for people to see that human rights are an important equalizer for the world, and it also is an amplifier of people's talents. when people are not fearing repression, if people are not fearing the loss of rights, if people are not fearing, abject poverty in their future, they can actually unleash their potential. And I think this is what people should be looking at. How do human rights sort of amplify what is possible in the world today? So I think that's the important thing. And then as governments move forward, developing policies that are proactive, that help people to engage more in civic life, to engage more in economic life, to engage more in community development, right? I think it is really important to say that you cannot just look at one group over another group and then ignore the rest. Because when you have problems, and largely in the world of work, if people are poor and working 3 or 4 jobs, and I'm sure when you're younger, I was younger working 3 or 4 jobs just to make ends meet for myself. But as you get onto the road and the ladder of success for your career, that changes the dynamics for you. And it's not only just for us sitting here, in the United States or in Europe or in other advanced economies, but it can happen all around the world. Young people can take advantage of technology, give them the education that they need, provide them with those opportunities, applying that technology to address problems. Wouldn't it be great if we can do remote healthcare for people in remote areas? Wouldn't it be great if we could do, look at mining and doing this remote access so that we have autonomous vehicles that are doing the mining, by people who are trained on that, who would otherwise be affected by the disasters that happen in mining? Wouldn't it be great if we had predictive models that would allow us to look at where, environmental benchmarks can be either met or passed or fail? So I think what we have to do is look at ourselves as a community of nations that are working together, because the more money that is in the global economy, the greater the velocity of that money is out there and the higher the level of standard of the people. So let us fulfill the promise of the United Nations, fulfill the promise of us in humanity, and let's provide opportunities for all of society and not turn a blind eye to the problems that are in front of us.
It is absolutely correct. And it's to all of our advantages. Well, it's to our advantage, obviously, to invest in our populations, to make sure that they're well fed, to make sure that they're well educated, they're well housed, they're well clothed, they have healthcare situations or healthcare coverage just on across the board. It just makes for a stronger, healthier, and in many cases, more profitable society, and more profitable, not just in the financial end, but also across the board as far as profitable to everyone who lives in that society. But Kevin, I think you're absolutely correct. And I really appreciate you bringing us up to date on this very complex issue. And it is very complex. And it's one that we all need to learn more about. And you have certainly helped us to do that today. But Kevin Cassidy, thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you so much, Bill.
My pleasure. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us today on Global Connections Television.